At Arizona State University, we're bringing world-class education from our globally acclaimed faculty to you. Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Learn more at asuonline.asu.edu. At Arizona State University, we're bringing world-class education from our globally acclaimed faculty to you. Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Learn more at asuonline.asu.edu. At Arizona State University, we've made online education better, smarter, and more personalized so you can go further in your aspiring field.
I decided to pursue medicine once I realized that ASU did have the online program for biological sciences. You're still required to learn the same curriculum. You're still being tested on the same content that anyone would be tested on in person. The comprehensiveness of the program prepared me so well for medical school.
Explore over 350 plus programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
What happens when a 4-year-old's father just disappears one day, leaving behind a broken family and a child who gets adopted by people who think burning a 6-year-old's hands on a stove is appropriate discipline? Well, sometimes that child grows up to be Joseph Kallinger, Philadelphia's most disturbing serial killer who turned his own 12-year-old son into his accomplice. This is a story about how trauma gets passed down through generations like a family heirloom nobody wants. And it's about to get really, really dark. You know how some stories make you wonder if evil can really get passed down through generations? Well, Joseph Kallinger's life reads like a case study in how darkness can literally transfer from parent to child. Born in December 1935 in Philadelphia, Joseph was third in a line of men carrying the same name, and that's where the trouble started. His father, Joseph Lee Brenner, Jr., had what you might call commitment issues. When little Joseph was only 4 years old, his dad basically pulled a disappearing act. One day he was there, the next he was gone, leaving behind a wife and a child with no explanation and no support. Joseph's mother, Judith, found herself in an impossible situation. Single motherhood in the 1930s wasn't exactly a cakewalk. So she made the difficult decision to place Joseph in a Catholic orphanage temporarily while she figured out how to make ends meet. But temporary became permanent, and Joseph ended up being put up for adoption. Enter Stephen and Anna Kallinger, Austrian immigrants who seemed like they could provide the stable home Joseph desperately needed. They were devout Catholics, strict but caring, and for 2 whole years, Joseph experienced something resembling a normal childhood. He shed the Brenner name and became Joseph Kallinger. But here's where things get messy. Judith decided to resurface and demand compensation from the Kallingers for adopting her son. Her audacity is astounding. The Kallingers naturally refused to pay what amounted to be ransom for a child she'd already given up, and the adoption proceeded anyway since she'd already forfeited her parental rights. At age 6, Joseph heard a neighborhood friend drop the F-bomb. Like any curious kid, he didn't understand what it meant and he repeated it at home. Stephen and Anna's reaction was absolutely disproportionate. They grounded him for a week, and during that time, both parents took turns beating him with a leather belt and a wooden spoon. The really messed up part? They never explained what the word meant or why he was being punished. Joseph learned that making mistakes resulted in prolonged physical and emotional abuse, but he had no framework for understanding why. This became the template for every interaction in that household. The beatings escalated to a level that can only be described as torture. Joseph was forced to kneel on jagged rocks and sandpaper. He was made to eat feces. He was locked in closets, starved, and burned with hot irons or forced to place his hands over the stove. When he was 6 years old, one of Stephen's beatings was so severe that Joseph required hernia surgery. At 9, Joseph was sexually assaulted by a group of older boys. Between the abuse at home and the trauma outside, this kid never really had a chance to develop a normal social connection or coping mechanisms. Joseph's behavior started showing the classic signs of a deeply damaged child. He became withdrawn and difficult to get along with. He had no real friends and no one at home he could trust. The incidents started small, but escalated quickly. When he didn't receive a birthday present, he cut up his classmates' coats. He carved a hole in his bedroom wall for sexual purposes, keeping pictures of both men and women nearby along with a knife. The knife wasn't optional. He needed it to become aroused, and eventually he needed to stab or slash the pictures to reach climax. Joseph also began stealing money from his parents, believing he could buy friendships by taking other kids to the movies. Each time he was caught, Stephen and Anna would force him to burn his hands on the stove as punishment. This created a vicious cycle where Joseph continued to rebel and his parents continued to escalate their brutal punishments. At 15, Joseph found what he thought was love with a girl named Hilda Bergman. Their relationship included premarital sex, which absolutely infuriated his devout Catholic parents. When they ordered him to stop seeing Hilda, Joseph made a decision that would define the rest of his life. He dropped out of school, moved out, and got a job at his father's shoe shop. This job would later earn him the nickname, the Shoemaker, and despite his parents' disapproval, he married Hilda at 17. They had 2 children together, but within 3 years, Hilda left him. The official reason was another man, but the real reason was that Joseph had become physically violent toward her and their children. During the divorce proceedings, Joseph was hospitalized with severe headaches and loss of appetite. The doctors couldn't find any physical cause for his symptoms and concluded that he was undergoing stress from the divorce. It was making him physically ill. This was probably the first documented sign of his deteriorating mental state. Within 7 months, Joseph was married again and would go on to have 5 more children with his second wife. His behavior continued to deteriorate as he cycled through hospital stays for memory loss, suicide attempts, and arson on his own properties to claim insurance money. In 1972, 3 of Joseph's children walked into the local police station and told officers exactly what their father was doing to them. According to the children, Joseph had created a punishment room in the basement, lit only by a kerosene lamp. He would take them there whenever the itch in his hand told him they had misbehaved. The room contained rope for binding victims, and once they were restrained, Joseph would beat them with shoe soles, leather straps, rubber hoses, and a cat-o'-nine-tails whip. His daughter, Mary Jo, whom he called the Bright One, endured this treatment 5 times a week between the ages of 10 and 13. Joseph's twisted logic was that Mary Jo had to pick winning horses for him to bet on at the track. When the horses lost, she had to be punished. Some punishments involved him throwing needles at her while she stood in front of him. Once, while she was tied up, he held a knife to her throat and threatened to kill her if she moved. Another time, he pressed a heated spatula to her leg, leaving a permanent scar. Every family member lived in constant fear. Everyone was in bed by 7 or 8 in the evening because they knew at least one of them would be woken up at midnight for a trip to the basement. The punishments were so severe that Joseph's son, Joseph Jr., tried to run away from home. Joseph chased his son with a gun, brought him back, tied him to the refrigerator, and beat him with a hammer for about a week. The level of cruelty was beyond comprehension. When police arrested Joseph based on the children's testimony, they noticed that he was hallucinating and having conversations with someone named Charlie, who wasn't there. He also claimed that God was sending him messages about healing 40,000 people through their feet. Psychological testing revealed Joseph was a paranoid schizophrenic with an IQ of 84. Everything was in place to keep Joseph locked up or committed to a mental institution. But then his children recanted their allegations, and Joseph was released. This decision would prove catastrophic. Shortly after his release, Joseph attacked 10-year-old Jose Calazo, a Puerto Rican boy. He tortured the child, cut off his genitals, and killed him. Because there was no apparent connection between Joseph and Jose, the murder went unsolved, and Joseph remained free. Joseph then took out massive life insurance policies on all of his sons. When Joseph Jr., the same son who had tried to run away, was found dead in an abandoned construction building, the insurance company found the death suspicious and refused to pay out. But by then, Joseph had found something more compelling than money. a willing accomplice. Joseph's 12-year-old son Michael became his partner in crime. Every sick thought or urge Joseph experienced, Michael seemed to share and enjoy. This represents the most disturbing aspect of this entire story, the darkness being passed to yet another generation. For 6 weeks in 1974, Joseph and Michael terrorized people across Philadelphia, Baltimore, and New Jersey. They would appear at people's doors, pretending to be salesmen, and once they gained entry, they would rob and abuse their victims both physically and sexually. During one incident, they interrupted a bridge game and found themselves with 8 victims. Each person arrived 1 or 2 at a time, giving Joseph and Michael the opportunity to deal with them methodically. They ordered everyone to strip and bound them with electrical cords. When 21-year-old Maria Fashing, the last person to arrive, refused to follow Joseph's orders, he stabbed her in the neck and the back. During the commotion, one victim managed to escape and scream for help. But by the time police arrived, Joseph and Michael were long gone. Thanks to eyewitness reports, police were able to track down Joseph and Michael. Joseph was charged with 3 counts of murder for Jose Collazo, Joseph Jr., and Maria Fashing. Michael was sent to a reformation facility until he became an adult, then changed his name and disappeared from the story entirely. Joseph tried to claim insanity, but was found competent to stand trial and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He made several suicide attempts over the years and was transferred to a mental hospital. He died of heart failure and seizure in 1996 at age 59, having spent his last 11 years on suicide watch and at least 5 of those years in solitary confinement. Joseph Kallinger's story demonstrates how trauma can perpetuate itself across generations. From his father's abandonment to his adoptive parents' extreme punishments to his own abuse of his children, each generation passed down their damage to the next. The fact that his son Michael became his accomplice shows how this cycle can create monsters, who then create more monsters themselves. What makes this case particularly disturbing is how many opportunities there were to intervene. If the children's initial allegations had been properly investigated and prosecuted, multiple lives could have been saved. If Joseph had received appropriate mental health treatment instead of being released, the killing spree may have never happened. Joseph Kallinger's legacy serves as a sobering reminder of how childhood trauma, left untreated, can manifest in the most horrific ways. His story proves that monsters aren't born, they're made, often by the very people who should protect them. Thanks for listening to 10-Minute Murder, bingeable true crime stories. My name is Joe, I'm the host, and right out of the gate, let me be transparent and honest with you. I ate a muffin right before I did this, and it was a mistake. I know better. I don't eat right before I do these episodes because, as one does, you have food particles in your mouth, and it makes it hard to sound okay. Don't make me feel gross about this. You eat and talk at the same time, but the difference is, and that's fine, by the way, that doesn't bother me, but the difference is I am doing a podcast and you're just talking to your family and your friends. It's not important that you sound clear and easily understandable because they can just say, "What'd you say?" But for me, I had to go back and redo some parts because chocolate muffins from Trader Joe's, they get me every time. I know better. I'm sorry. Anyway, if you're a brand new listener to the podcast, make sure you hit subscribe wherever you're listening. If you're an OG listener, I love you. Make sure you share the show with your friends and family. Rate and review wherever you can do that. Quickly, let's get to an email. Subject, question for the pod. Hey Joe, been binging 10-Minute Murder on my commute, and now I think people on the bus are scared of me because I'm always nodding along to murder stories with earbuds in. Here's my question. By the way, you might need to turn it down or get earbuds that don't leak out. Here's my question. If you could sit down and interview one killer you've covered, who would it be and why? Also, follow-up, would you be scared or secretly excited? Big fan of the show. I appreciate how you keep it respectful but still human. Marcus in Minneapolis. Marcus, thank you for the email, and my answer to this question is different than it used to be. I've been asked this before 2 or 3 years ago, and I answered it, and I said, no one. I don't want to interview anyone ever. No killers ever. But I've become more and more interested in the psychology of what makes a killer, the childhood, the mental health aspect of it all. And I think that just that part of it would be something I'd want to bring up and discuss with a person. But the one that I think I would like to interview, and it's impossible because they're dead, it's Charles Manson. And the reason is, have you seen an interview with Charles Manson? He says some off-the-wall stuff, and I think that could be interesting. And part 2 of that is, would you be secretly excited or scared? Oh, for sure scared. Shitless. I wouldn't do it with just me in the room. There'd have to be a team of guards, armed guards, in the room at all time. Thank you, Marcus, for the email, and thank you for listening to 10 Minute Murder. I'll see you next time.
At Arizona State University, we've made online education better, smarter, and more personalized so you can go further in your aspiring field.
I decided to pursue medicine once I realized that ASU did have the online program for biological sciences. You're still required to learn the same curriculum. You're still being tested on the same content that anyone would be tested on in person. The comprehensiveness of the program prepared me so well for medical school.
Explore over 350 plus programs at asuonline.asu.edu.